Hi, my name is Beverly Walker, and I am one of the instructors that teaches this course on a regular basis. I wanted to just do a short video to talk a little bit about Bloom's taxonomy. There's oftentimes there's some confusion about Bloom's and what it means and why it is important. What is on your screen right now, the taxonomy that you see, or this triangle or pyramid that you see, is from the Vanderbilt University Center for Teaching. And it's a great example of how we can look at Bloom's as a hierarchy. Sometimes people get confused with that aspect of it. We know that Benjamin Bloom incorporated or discovered, or however you want to say it, the three domains of learning: the cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. Well, along with that, he developed this taxonomy that is used to design learning objectives for courses, classes, anything where we want people to learn. As you can see, it starts at the bottom of the pyramid and with remember, and goes to the top, which is create, and there's a lot of steps in between. Now, it's a taxonomy because at the bottom, remember, that is a lower level of what I refer to as cognitive engagement. You don't have to think a lot. You're not delving deep into making people think hard. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the work involved. It's the thinking and the learning that goes along with it. At some point along the way, Bloom's taxonomy was changed to make these words verbs, as in, so you may see them as remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Bloom's taxonomy is important because it enters into our learning objectives, and that's what the activity is surrounding Bloom's and your lesson plan, is to determine which level of Bloom's your lesson plan is targeting based upon the learning objectives that are there. That's why it's important that every good lesson plan have learning objectives, so we know the degree to which we want students to learn, and it also goes to the complexity of the lesson plan. So this is what you're supposed to determine: what level of Bloom's your lesson plan is targeting. So there's some people have used the Remembering When program for older adults, and this is a great example. Some of their lesson plans include words like recall or memorize. And those are very basic learning objectives. You will see that that falls under the lowest level of remember. And that is based upon their cognitive learning, their knowledge. You can see off to the side, define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, and state. Those are very basic learning objectives. If you had the same lesson plan and you wanted the students to explain, that is a higher level. It's more than just listing. It's more than just memorizing or recalling facts. It requires an understanding. And so classify, describe, discuss, explain, identify, all of those, it's a higher level. In some classes that I teach, a lot of times students you ask them to explain, and what they do is list. And they get points taken off simply because I want more from them. I want them to understand a little bit more than that. Demonstrate is another objective that's often used. I think it's used in the Remembering When program as well. We might ask them to demonstrate crawling low under smoke. We might ask students to demonstrate calling 911. And so that is, again, a higher level of understanding. This might, it goes to applying, it's taking what they've learned and applying it to a particular situation. So again, you see the words off to the side there: execute, implement, solve, use, demonstrate, interpret, operate, schedule, and sketch. So if we are going to ask people, say we've got a group of fourth graders and we're going to ask them, talk about home escape planning and how they have to decide whether to use their primary exit pathway or their secondary exit pathway, that again is a little bit higher order, maybe analyzing. They have to analyze the situation and make that determination. When we think about our objectives and it's all tied in together. Objectives, the lesson plan, perhaps the time involved in that lesson, they're all tied in together. And what we evaluate students on is also tied to those learning objectives. So when we think about, say, if we have a 15 to 20 minute presentation that we're going to do for, say, a group of first graders, you're not going to have them creating something. First of all, our first graders, based upon their stage of development, are they able to create something new? I don't know. Probably not a home escape plan. So you have to look at your objectives. You have to look at your audience. What are they capable of? And we've already covered that. If not, we will cover that in this class. It's not so much about what we want students to do, but what the lesson plan is designed for them to learn or know or do. This is especially important when we look at a lesson plan that somebody else has created. When we're creating them ourselves, we know what we want, but we also have to remember the characteristics of our audience. So we have to really be careful looking at that. It's not what we want them to learn, but what is this lesson plan designed to teach them? Is it very basic? Do we want them to learn or do more? Are they capable of learning or doing more? One of the great ones I think is that comes to my mind, an example is a child passenger safety class. You do a classroom portion and that's where they get this cognitive information. Then they do the psychomotor, which is perhaps to install that safety seat. But then they demonstrate that, but then also they can evaluate to, if it's too loose, how to fix it, what they can do to determine that. One lesson plan is not going to meet all of Bloom's taxonomy, all the levels. That's just not going to happen with one lesson plan. We may, in our heart, want this audience to embrace all of those things, but chances are really good that it's not going to happen in one setting. It's going to take multiple days of instruction or multiple classes. Like, say if you have a fourth grade class that you are visiting once a month during the school year, you're going to be able to get to a higher level, again, based upon their ability. But that 15, 20, 30 minute presentation, we're not going to get very high in Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So we just want to make sure that you make this connection that Bloom's taxonomy is important, because those words that are off to the side of each of those levels represents what we want students to learn, do, know, explain at the completion of the lesson. We have to look at those objectives, those words, the objectives that we write or are written for a lesson plan, drive that lesson plan. If something is mentioned, if there's an objective for it, you need to talk about it in your lesson. If there's not an objective for that particular skill or knowledge or item, then you probably don't need to be talking about it at that moment in time because they're not connected. So objectives drive the lesson plan. They drive our presentation. They will drive our evaluation of the student. We're not going to evaluate them on something that's not included in the objectives of that lesson plan. So without, there's many courses that are offered on writing objectives for lesson plans and courses and classes. So a lot of times people don't understand that these are not just words on the page, but they're indicators of a level of cognitive engagement that we want the student to have. And it's an indicator of what we want the student to be able to do or know after the completion of the lesson. So in the activity related to Bloom's, you were to take the objectives in your lesson plan and then look at them and try to determine which level of this taxonomy your lesson plan meets. And so it's as simple as that. If your lesson plan says, list the steps in stop, drop, and roll, that's going to be remember. If it says demonstrate the steps in stop, drop, and roll, then that is a higher order, and that may be application. No one lesson plan is going to meet all of these, but I do want you to understand that Bloom's taxonomy is connected to the objectives of a lesson plan. Every lesson plan should have them. That's an unwritten rule. And the objectives drive the presentation. If it's not in your objectives, you probably don't need to be talking about it unless somebody asks a question. And certainly it drives your evaluation. So that's the basis for this activity. And hopefully that's a better explanation of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering that it starts at the bottom with remember. That's the simplest level. And we not only do these drive our lesson plan, but we always have to keep them in mind when it comes to remembering what our students are capable of doing. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope that this was helpful to you.